Hello, 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 hello. Today I'm talking with Stefanie Puckett. We talked about one seminar too much and the impact on where you sit in a meeting on the power dynamics.
I'm Yves Hanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it.
Hello everyone, and hello Stefanie. Is that how I should pronounce your name?
Stefanie is perfect. Thank you.
And and normally I say I have Stefanie, and with me in this case, for me, this means I'm in Belgium, in Ghent, and Stefanie is in Germany, if I'm correct.
Right.
Somehow Google has a little bit harder, and it's in Augsburg. Is that how I should pronounce that?
Augsburg, right. It's close to Munich. Mm-hmm.
And I think my daughter was just came back today from Austria, and she might have actually passed by your location.
Yeah, so, the area, yeah.
So that's and we're recording this on a Friday evening. It's 17:30, let's say it like that, in Ghent, and I guess it's the same on your side.
Mm-hmm.
So because that's how time zones work in Europe, we're more or less all in the same time zone. So Stefanie, before we jump into the questions, what do you want people to know about you? How do you want to introduce yourself?
So I am here in Augsburg since 7 years, I believe. And before that, I lived in several locations within Germany. I also lived in Switzerland for a while and in the US for a while. I am 41 years old and I'm married. I have 3 children. Those are probably the biggest things to say. I am a psychologist by trade, which is important. You'll see it throughout the conversation. It's just a big part of my thinking and doing. What I studied back then in university. After university, I worked in smaller consulting companies, boutique consulting companies. In Switzerland, I worked for ABB in talent and assessment management. And in the US, I owned my own business, which I had set up and running within 24 hours. This is how little the bureaucracy is over there. It was a great experience. Yeah, and I do right now. I own my own business since 2 years. Before that, I was working as a freelancer for another 2 years. That's about myself. I did manage to finish my doctoral thesis within 8 years. It's a long time, but
you were working at the same time.
I was working at the same time, exactly. So it was kind of a stepchild project I had. That's how it felt all the way through, unfortunately.
And then I think it's really an achievement because I see a lot of people working while doing that and then finally giving up because the work is taking over. So
yeah, and I think there were a lot of moments where I was close to giving up, partly because of just the workload, but also it's an illusion to work and think academically while you are with both feet in the business doing the work. So at some points I had to realize I'm quite a step away from academia. So I think my dissertation could have been much more, definitely, if I would have had the time, the connection with the university, get some challenges in one or the other direction, but it was not, and it was okay. And I think that once I said, you know what, it's fine. My research question is still important and relevant, and I do it. I do it well. Then I developed the grit to actually finish it. Yeah, I think that's. I don't know if you've heard about the concept of grit.
Yes, I even read the book called Grit. I'm not sure
exactly.
the only place where it's coming from, but yeah.
No, that's basically where it is coming from, and it just stresses the fact that simply keep doing what you're doing and have this persistence of getting things done in itself is it a talent? It's certainly something you have, you bring to the table. And I think that, I don't know if I had it before, I certainly have it now. Doing the training. Yeah, I think that's, and when I talk about myself, I allow myself a small self-promotion. Maybe a question that I get asked on a regular basis is, how does the psychology end up in agile? And the question is certainly legit and relevant. That happened when I worked in one of those small consulting companies, and the customers simply started asking, yeah, but we do all this, but now what about this agile thing? You got anything on agile? It's like, on what? I've heard the terms before, right? But since I'm not a software developer, hadn't too much contact with the term itself and all the theory behind it. So I just started trying to learn about it and read about it, experiment with agile working and all that. And for me, the big moment that happened, locked out. The big moment I had of realization of how I connected to agile was when I started reading the Agile Manifesto. Like a huge, I've read it and I noticed, wait a minute, I know all this. I know at least most of it. Sounds very familiar. Isn't that what I've learned in organizational psychology? It's like, absolutely. And by the time I realized what agility and all, basically the Agile Manifesto, what it preaches is what we've been preaching for decades. But not a lot of people listen to, university psychologists and how they should design their work. So seeing this, seeing a lot of those really good things we try to promote to make work better just come in. Yeah, people would say from Silicon Valley, right? Just come over and determine our workspaces. It's fine, but there's so many things in there that I'm so glad that they're heard now. They have a much bigger voice than they had before. So that's how I started connecting with it. And then I had those leaders and HR people that, leaders that were 15 or 20 years in the job, successful HR people that were very competent in my view and really did a great job, that seemed to be a little maybe intimidated because there was something new coming, this whole agility thing, and they didn't know about it. They don't know what Scrum is. They don't know what all that stuff even means. Nobody was able to explain it to them either. What's agile leadership? We have servant leadership. That's right, and it's an important part, but it doesn't really explain to you the shift that happens within, the leadership competencies you bring, the leadership behavior. We can't just replace ourselves with servants and feel like we've done the job. And this is when I wrote my first book with my boss at the time, which is called Agile Leadership Competencies for the Agile Transformation, which tries to make the bridge to show people that what we've learned in leadership competencies before, a lot of it is still applicable. A lot of it is. There is a shift that happens, but that doesn't mean we have to eradicate everything and learn everything new. But it does mean what we know, we might need to apply differently. We might need to follow here and there the work requirements, what the world requires from us, and reprioritizing how we lead. And this was the first book I've written. The resonance was good. It was also part, honestly, of my personal journey into trying to work more agile and to also integrate it in my thinking. And then somebody asked me if they could. The model I describe is from IMD Business School. I like it because it has some research base. And then somebody asked me, can I apply this with my team? And that completely took me off guard because I was so focused on leadership. And then I realized, you know what, you can. You actually should. Isn't agility all about empowering the people that actually do the work, that are the teams? And then I thought, okay, I can't stop in publishing about agile leadership. If leadership really is something we need to share with the organization. So I started thinking, what is required differently if we say we want to do this, we would like to achieve agility, but we want to do it through the people, not top down. And that's when I started thinking more along the lines of ways of working. What do we need to do? How do we need to design the work and the organization so people can actually be empowered and thrive and drive agility? And that was the second book, the Agile Culture Code, where I tried to, just lay out a playbook. Maybe that's how it was called originally, how we can achieve agility through simply enabling and empowering agile working on the edges of the organization where the value gets created. And now, today, I know it's not live, but today is still a special day for me because the third book I've written along the subject was actually went live today on Amazon. I didn't market anything yet, and all I have is this not for resale copy to show, a test book I had ordered, which that's a great question. Why did I write this? I think in the Agile Culture Code, what I did is I operated on a lot of psychological theories. Some of them I name, some I don't. I just draw the conclusions. And I feel like if I just draw conclusions and present the interpretation of my findings, that is fine. But I actually prefer being more transparent and sharing what's actually behind my thinking, which is not originated by Stefanie. It's originated by a whole bunch of scientists and thinkers well ahead of me. And so I started doing the work and just checking all the sources, getting all the models and theories, and try to make a small book. It is small, where I just simply present you don't see it this way, you see it, present the psychological theories that went into the thinking of how does Agile work, and how can we make it better. Yeah, that basically already describes a little bit about my journey through agility.
Yeah, and just indeed, I wanted to show the three books next to each other because somehow when you show it, the camera might be flipped, but this is for the people if they want to see. So Agile Leadership, the Agile Culture Code, and then the new one from today. And today is 11th of April for the people who are wondering when that was, because it will be published a little bit later indeed. And I do want to, and now I have to swap a little bit, bring out the other book if people want to know. That's the book that you talked about before from Angela de Court.
Yes, great.
Grit. That's the other book that we talked about. I thought it's also probably about the same size as your last book. It's not that big, but yeah, for me, interesting to read, to learn a little bit about where do that get from, and how can people, learn a bit about what does grit mean and how could I, get that power of that passion and get the perseverance on these kind of things. Let's move into that because we've already been talking. It's a very nice introduction. We learn in all kind of things, but let's move into that very first question. And let's move this around a little bit. What's something that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you in who you are?
Yeah, it's actually, people don't know it because it's such a small detail. I don't really share it often, but when I started studying psychology, I was totally fascinated by clinical psychology, trying to understand, where things go wrong. How does that show us how our mind works? So that was where
and for the people that don't know much about psychology, what is clinical psychology? How is that different than general psychology?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So there's several, and actually varies from university to university. I have a diploma, which is a master in psychology, which means you have all kinds of topics from physiology, psychiatry, clinical psychology, which means diagnosing and treating psychological illnesses. And then you also have things like health psychology. You have organizational, occupational psychology. Differential psychology is all about personality psychology. You have general psychology, which is how do you research, how do you do experiments, probably know Pavlov's dog, etc., etc. So all those kind of general topics. And then at some point during your studies, you get a set focus area where really you book a few more seminars in that very subject. And about 6 months before I planned to graduate, I made a small career plan change and decided not to become a clinical psychologist. So gladly, I had booked one seminar too much in the past. It was easy for me to just quickly switch into organizational psychology as a main major during my studies. And I think that this little switch, maybe more the where did it come from, is something that impacted me a lot. At that time, I was working at the Sigmund Freud Institute in Frankfurt. I worked with psychoanalysts in clinical diagnostics and a few other research questions. Psychoanalysis is extremely fascinating. It really is. Cognitively, it's extremely rewarding up to a certain point where you learn that at some point you went from exploring people's minds into a certain form of dogma, right? That we already know. We know what's wrong with people. We know how things work. And that kind of attitude for me was a little bit hard to accept. I feel like things are a little bit more complex than one theory of school can explain to you. And I was still very much fascinated by it. And then at some point, one of the psychoanalysts I work with, she came to me and she said, I'm not so sure you should become a psychoanalyst. I was like, whoa,
Okay.
why? And the answer at that point was, I'm too dogmatic. And I didn't understand it. I thought that my critique on the method was, the method is too dogmatic. Dogmatic in my case meant that I applied independent standards. And that is true. I wasn't too open in changing independent standards into some certain way of explaining things. And that was, at that time it hurt a little bit, but I think it was a kick in the right direction to say, okay, then, if a school restricts my thinking, and that's what I felt, it's not the school I should go down to. And with this, I thought, okay, maybe clinical psychology isn't exactly what I wanted. I wasn't too much interested in other psychotherapy schools at that time. So that's what brought me into the business.
Interesting. And so if you look back at that incident or that message you got, if you look back now from a distance, do you feel that was a correct message, as in it's good that I didn't become it? Not about the sub message about, okay, this is good or bad, but do you agree that for you becoming a psychoanalyst was maybe not the right thing, or do you still regret it somehow?
That's actually a good question. And depending on the year and the situation, my answer might vary. I have friends that went down this road. And they today work as clinical psychologists, and we trade stories. I provide my stories from, executive coaching or psychological counseling, and they bring their stories up from patients in severe depressions, schizophrenia, and other cases. And sometimes I think the one thing I miss is having gained that in-depth knowledge of clinical psychology. Should I have invested the 3 to 5 years, and in Germany between 30 and 100,000 euro for the education at that time? Maybe. I don't know, I can't say it. I probably would have still ended up where I am today, but with a little bit more of clinical experience. Sometimes I do look back, but here's the good thing, I can still do it. I can still go back to school and get my education as a psychotherapist. Still open.
Yeah, that's definitely the thing. I think that is something I keep telling my children as well. I still don't know what I will become later. I mean,
Yeah.
there's things that yeah were on my path before, but they might still come again or not. That's a little bit what I think it's interesting. And sometimes the message that because I got a different but a similar kind of message than you also some years ago, and sometimes the more I look at that, is this in my case said much more about that person than it said about me. There were things that were might be right, but the way the message was brought was definitely saying much more about them than it's about me. And I think that is also important when you say dogmatic. Maybe that was the school, and that's it's the overall idea. When somebody points a finger at you, they're actually pointing three fingers at them. It's a little bit that message that I sometimes recognize.
I don't know if you know that joke. It basically says the psychoanalyst is always right. So they confront you with something and you agree, then psychoanalyst obviously was right. Now, if you disagree, then they're even more right, because it means that you're in denial. So they actually, hit the exact spot. So there's no way of proving a psychoanalyst wrong. Maybe that's a kind of dogma. But you know what? Maybe giving me this message in this determined way, right? How can they predict my future? And if I change or not change, maybe that was, like you said, reflected part of the thinking at that time, that situation. And maybe it was a good thing I found out.
That's that is in the end they're right again.
Yeah.
Independent of that, and that's the thing. You found another way. You found another way to work and do other kind of stuff. Still using a lot of what you learned, I guess, along
Right.
the way. So that's and in that sense, that's a little bit on how a lot of us move. And actually kind of brings me also to that second question, because that second question is about, if you had not been doing what you've been doing now, what would have become of you? Is that psychoanalyst might be the logical answer based on that story, but maybe there's something else. Is there something that maybe even little Stefanie wanted to become?
A cashier, working at a cash point. That was very little, right? It's a cool thing you see people working at. I did for 6 years. I did work in a supermarket during school and university. I think it was good. I actually sometimes I walk down the aisle of a supermarket and you see the half empty boxes. And I still sometimes have the impulse to pull it out, put the packages in the shelf, and then go and remove the packaging. I don't think that would have been my career path, but your first answer would probably be the correct one. I would have became a psychoanalyst or a clinical psychologist, and I always wanted to still have a foot in research. It's just I like finding insights, challenging my mind. So I probably would be somewhere in clinical research and doing some therapy. But I would like to know, that's why your question is good. There's some point, right, where we decide what we want to be or become. And I would like to know, at the time that you ask yourself that question, a lot of things already happened. A lot of micro commitments you've already done. So the question is, how free did you still decide? Or where you're like, oh, wait, I had that major in school, I got a good grade in XYZ, shouldn't I? How much those things you've already done up to that point influence your decision. So it would be really nice to find out, and sometimes ask myself the question, if not this, if also not that subject, right, at university, what would I have become? And then I remind myself, I'm still young. I can ask myself this question every day. Like you said, what do I want to do when I grow up or when I'm old? That's relative, right? So I actually like asking myself that question without having the answer already.
And So, like you said, you at some point you wanted to become a cashier, then you became it because I guess you needed or wanted money while you were studying. Was there at any point when you were doing that you said, "Oh, it was not what I was hoping," or it was actually, or is there moments that you now, like you say, you walk into a store that you actually think, "Oh, actually, I sometimes wish I could just go to doing this because of, I don't know, maybe that life was easier in ways than your current life." I don't know.
I think the one thing, how we talk a lot about flow, and we feel like, okay, the perfect moment of challenge, something that is challenging, it's complex enough to stretch us just a little bit, but still within our competency range, and we just flow and forget the time around work, and work is fun. And I feel like, yes, it is true, but there was a little bit of flow too, just walking down those aisles and cleaning up, organizing. What I like about it is it does connect you to a different side of work, which is just a cool thing of being busy. It's something, to do something that's okay, enjoyable. It sometimes keeps your mind off of other things. That's what I sometimes think back. At the time, I did not enjoy the work too much. I also started working at a scientific institute at the same time, and at some point, I made the decision to drop the supermarket and just go full force into the scientific institute. Why? Because it kind of paid into my education. So it was basically driven by how do I maximize my learning, or maybe even my career chances. That was the driver at that time.
So that's yeah, and that's a little bit why I asked the question, because sometimes when we look back and somehow people think like, oh, being a cashier is a lesser job than other kind of things, and it's not, it's just different. Yeah, it's and some people are really happy, like, yeah, because once you get home you don't have to worry it anymore.
Exactly.
If you're thinking about a problem that you worked in a team or you have discussions, probably that's more in your head than, okay, I helped out a customer at the shop, and yeah, probably in the evening I don't think about that customer anymore, except if they're being really rude. That's a different kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is actually a great point, because I still remember a few situations where, simple as that, I helped a customer find a product, and I felt like I made this person's day better. They went out with a smile. And it's maybe it's really these kind of simple things. And today I had a coaching client, and he talked to me. He was thinking about certain career changes, and he was weighing the options, and he said, this path would give me more headspace. What's headspace? Yeah, I would take my mind off of a few things that I'm, worried right now, I feel responsible for. And this would give me the headspace to use my mind or think into other topics, or think about the same thing in much different ways, because I gained this. And I think working at the supermarket, I gained headspace. I did. For the stuff I learned at university, I had headspace to work with it. The research institute, once I entered the door, all I saw was diagnostics, some study, how many letters did come back, how many questionnaires do we have, what kind of statistical analysis could I do. Did I? Yeah, I gained some things, but I did lose headspace. So I like this, and I think we can use our head, our mind, at work. We can also use it for other things that might not be the 9 to 5 aspects that keep us busy. And yeah, it is true. Now I'm thinking about a project ahead, or did I change anybody's life? Did I solve a conflict? Did I help a team? Those things usually, are a little bit more complex, and it's not always so easy to see what was my doing in it, or what exactly and how exactly did I help person X, Y, Z. Sometimes it is, sometimes not. But just as simple as this guy at the supermarket had a question, and I was able to help and cheer the person up. That's kind of it's an how to say, it's an easy win, right? Now you get pieces and you say, wow, let's see, I can help you get through it, but it might not be just a joyride. It might require some hard work and a lot of reflection. So yeah, it's different kind of reward. It's hard to describe.
I like the word reward here, because it's a different kind of way of things that we get, and that is a reward. Having extra headspace is also a reward, and being able to come home and let's say like, okay, I don't have to worry and think about other stuff. I have all that headspace and energy left to live whatever life that want to be, and that can be with a family, but that can be just as well as taking care of siblings or mothers or daughters, or doing whatever wild adventurous thing. That's the other thing. So
exactly same as letting conversations go where they flow. It's like today, right? We don't have an agenda. You didn't invite me to give a speech about a certain topic or anything. You just invited me for a conversation. So now I got headspace. I can go wherever the conversation flows without restricting, the conversation unnecessarily.
I really like that. That's actually part of how I want this conversation to have. And then indeed, there is some guidance with some questions, but it can move in all kinds of directions. And one of the directions I want to move is actually with that next question, like, what do you consider? Because some of these things that we talked about is sometimes also a challenge. What is for you at this moment the biggest challenge, at least the biggest challenge you want to share openly on the internet? And why is that a good thing for you?
Actually, draws back a little bit to our conversation. So the first biggest challenge I have, obviously, is 3 children and trying to have a career. It's a challenge. It's basically a challenge every day to try to wiggle your way through it and find a good balance. But then the other challenge that I feel like it might have to do with my age. It comes around 40. That you start asking yourself more of that purpose question. What we had before, what do you want to be when you grow old? What kind of life professional life do you want to have? And I keep catching myself asking myself this question, and I find it's wrong. Think about, okay, should I go back to school? Should I switch careers? Should I switch my focus? And every time I ask myself the question, I have I picture myself in 10 or 20 years. Stefanie doing X or this, and I think this is a totally restricting and false way of thinking about it. So my challenge is to remind myself, I am not looking for a solution for the next 20 years. I'm looking for something I want to do today or tomorrow. The next day, I might go down a different road, and that opens up. I just find it funny. It opens up so many more possibilities where you don't see yourself having a lifelong career in the field, but do you see yourself working in it for a few years? Maybe yes, maybe that would be an enrichment for me, although it might be out of line, right, in my CV or so. And I'm still, it truly is a very big challenge for myself, because I just keep having to pull myself out and tell myself, what's good for today? What will be good for tomorrow? That's all I need to worry about, and then see where things go.
I like that. It's I think it's really good. Well, I love the way you say, okay, thinking about 20 years ahead. I used to always think a lot like, okay, where do I want to be in 5 years? I try to do that every holiday, but I've noticed I do this a lot less, because I think it's also, you didn't say it, but at the same time you did say it. It takes us too much focus on the future and not enough on today. Okay, let's enjoy the moment, basically.
And, you ask yourself the questions, where do I want to be in 5 years? That might be a totally different thing for where you might want to be next year or tomorrow. This is where I feel like it gets so restrictive. in our thinking. Yeah.
Well, I did ask myself that for a long time, every year, and sometimes it shifted.
Yeah.
But I didn't always want to think, oh, today, because I always had the feeling like it sometimes is too much into the short thing, and I want to also look like, okay,
Yeah.
for some other things, like, okay, a PhD or writing a book, that's not something you do in just a week. So you need a little bit, well, the headspace then, or energy for doing something in the long run. And then I can imagine that even when you were doing your thesis or anything like that, that if you're somewhere, like you said, it took you 8 years for doing some of that stuff. I can imagine that some of the years you think like, do I still want to do it? Yeah, okay, I still want to do. So that might be good to keep thinking about that long term goal. But at the same time, yeah, I'm 50 already, thinking then, okay, what do I want to enjoy today, not just the long run. I still hope I'm still around in 20 years, but I will definitely not be around in 50 years. So
Yeah.
it's time to also think about today. And so that challenge for you, what's the good thing about that for you? Because I'm not sure if we talked a lot about
No,
that.
it's true. I think it's good in general to be challenged. I think it helps you to just keep moving and keep rethinking some things. And I guess the good thing is it does allow me to think in different directions, or to stop myself from being too determined in either direction. I think this is how it helps me. There is this, when you think about the way life happens, it happens. It's complex, complicated, and chaotic. And I feel like we spend a lot of time trying to clean it up, or trying to obviously control it, plan it, and all those things, and using things that life throws at you as an opportunity, right? Accepting new circumstances and then doing something with it. I think challenging myself to not commit too much to plans, or to formulate plans that go too far in the future. I think this is where it helps me to be more adaptive, be more flexible, to deal with what's right in front of me. Actually, when I asked my youngest son what she wants to become when she's older, she names two things. She says she wants to become an animal doctor and a policewoman. I said, it's totally fine. And when she tells anybody else, well, what do you want to do more? Or what's going to be your job? You got to decide. I keep telling her, you don't have to decide. You just do two things. Life is, we have a long lifespan we can fill with professional ideas. And I feel like, and I'm grateful for this, with longevity, and we get older and older, we will have to fill more years in working in the professional space. And I feel like people, and also employers, are more open to like second careers, or basically, having a career after a career, or doing something different in between. Yeah, that's my personal challenge. I feel like it's a challenge our society deals with as well.
Yeah, that's definitely a reason why I'm asking these kind of questions, because in a lot of cases I get answers that are not always the same, but similar kind of things that are not just for a person, but a lot of people can reflect to it and can think about that. So that is so nice about having such a free form conversation around these kind of challenges, because I think many people will recognize your answer, and that's a good thing. And again, just like in many of these conversations, I hear a person who is very passionate, who is very driven, who really has some, because the way you explain it's really also the way you talk about, the grit for having 8 years to do something, writing 3 books. There's a lot of drive, a lot of passion there. Do you know where that drive, that passion is coming from? What was that something, for example, that little Stefanie also had when you were young? Do you feel that there was already such a passion, or did you discover that at some point?
You know what I like about grid is it takes the discussion, the passion discussion, off the table. And I think this is important. It was the moments when I considered stopping the doctoral thesis altogether were my passionate moments, where I thought, I could do so much more, but I won't be able to. Just, might as well not do it. And this is when I thought, you know what? Just, it's not always about passion. Sometimes it's simply about grit. And honestly, avoidance of sunk cost. I invested so much time in meditation, not only my time, right? My circle of friends that didn't see me on the weekend, my husband who went, on bike rides by himself, and while I was sitting working on my dissertation, I did not allow myself to stop it. So this was not drive; it was stubbornness, maybe fear of sunk costs. I like to call it grit to make it, give it a positive spin. But what does drive me today is, one, I'm very insight driven. I want to learn. I want to explore things, challenge my thinking, challenge assumptions, and it kind of helps working with people, because you never know, right? Working with people, and even worse, with a group of people, when you have not only the individual dynamic, but the interactions between two or more people, you have to be prepared to be proven wrong any step of the way. I can't help it. I create hypotheses about all kinds of stuff, and I fuel myself being proven wrong. It means, wow, I just learned something new. That assumption was false, or I might have overlooked something, or maybe something changed and I didn't recognize it. And working with, as an organizational psychologist, you work a lot with these interpersonal dynamics, and it is an absolute fascinating work, especially power dynamics. What happens between, and I do work a lot in traditional fields, but really more modern flat hierarchy places, power is everywhere, and it's dynamics, different shapes, but it's always there. And it just has an incredible impact on people and on systems. And to be able to try to understand it, map it out, and change it, and then see what happens. Hopefully, most of what happens is what we desired, what would happen. That this is what really drives me today.
I love the whole discussion, or the whole thing, dynamic between drive, passion, grit, and even what you say, like, okay, the sunken costs, the fact that you don't want to give up because you've already invested, that is also some kind of drive, like some kind of like, okay, maybe it's not passion, but it's something like, come on, I've lost something if I don't achieve this. I think many people might recognize that, and I think for achieving something big, if it's writing a book, if it's achieving something like this, or maybe getting to the Olympics or whatever, there is at some point also that kind of grit that you need. Like, okay, I don't give up. I still believe I can make it. And it, sometimes it's called passion, but sometimes it's just like, okay, you know what? I might not even like to practice or like to keep writing, but I need to write, I don't know, 500 pages or 500 words today, or I need to finish a chapter, whatever, because, hey, damn it, I want to finish this. I want to prove that to the world, to myself. In most cases, it's just myself, that that time isn't lost. Sometimes it's to a parent or to whatever.
Where I learned the term sunk costs. I mean, every person that studied economics, right? I know they know it all. I didn't know it. I learned the term in one of the plenty educations I did, learning something about scaled agile, right? The SAFe framework.
Mhm.
There we learned about sunk costs in terms of that it is stupid to base a decision based on your prior investment. And I totally get this in business terms, but here I am saying that, I kind of anti-applied it in my own personal decisions. I'm fine. I think I'm very much happy about my decision, but that was one of those little micro moments where you feel like, oh, I totally applied the opposite, but it kind of worked for me. That's the kind of insight I like, and I still see where ignoring your sunk costs. It's extremely important not to be caught by bad decisions you made in the past, right? But it's kind
Well,
of
I think it's,
yeah.
for me, the sunken cost fallacy is also a lot about, okay, we know it's not possible to reach it, but we already invested and let's double down to it. And
Yeah, exactly. You want to avoid that. Yeah.
yeah, but of course, if it's about, well, the fact that you did achieve it, even after 8 years, for example, showed that it was not just pure sunken cost. It was just, okay, that was an investment, and
I
it
had to double my investment or extend it.
yeah. So that's
Mhm.
for me. It's yeah. But it's the problem is it's very hard to see it. Yeah, because of course, if you would have stopped at that time, you had all the excuses, or at some point in the 8 years, but when it's very tempting to then say, "But I'm almost there." But we know a lot of people that are almost there, but keep being almost there for 20 years and never
Yeah,
reach something.
exactly. Yeah.
But then again, I think there is a lot of musicians that worked on great musical albums or songs for many, many years.
Mhm.
And then people said, "Oh, don't work on it." And that for whatever reason, they kept working on it. And
Mhm.
then they have a masterpiece. Yeah. And
Mhm.
yeah, I haven't read your thesis or haven't read anything of that. But again, you reached it. You achieved something. And probably, I'm pretty sure that it was better than if you would have finished it in just 1 year.
Yeah.
Because then it
Yes.
would probably been rushed. That's the word I was looking for. And so,
Mhm.
things like that. And
Mhm.
for me, for example, when I work with people who have a PhD or something like that, for me, this is independent of what the PhD is about. For me, a PhD shows that people have grit, that they can
Mhm.
finish something, and that they take the time to do something
Mhm.
independent on how good the work is. And that is also something that is interesting. And that's, again, yeah, it's a way of calling it drive. It could be called lots of different things.
Mhm.
And yeah, I like that discussion in that direction. So really wonderful to think, and so to bring that up and to show that drive, grit, passion, they're all different names, and sometimes it's negative, like you say, the sunk
Sometimes it's
cost.
sunk cost. Exactly.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that's really nice. But that said, we talked already about some achievement. What do you consider your biggest achievement? And what I've noticed, and I want to go into a little bit before I go into the main question, is for many people here on the podcast, I've noticed that basically this is your moment to brag and to be really proud. Is that easy for you, Stefanie, to brag and to be proud?
It's a little painful. That's of course, the viewers don't know it, right? But that's why I asked you in the beginning, is it okay to show my books, or is that like braggy and really not appropriate? I don't like it because I feel like often it's inappropriate. But I did learn that a lot of it is not showing yourself, but it's showing your work and showing how others might benefit from it. That's my line, and I stick to it. And I thought about this question: what is my biggest achievement? First thing I thought about is a big project, the beginning of my self-employment. It's very challenging, and it's a success up until today. It's still running and going great. I thought that's a good bragging piece, right? I wrote articles about it. Sounded cool to me. But then I figure, wait a minute, is this my biggest achievement? Then I thought, okay, come on, take the doctorate, this painful 8-year long journey. Really what I achieved there is to gain maybe grit, yes, and humility. by failing one time after the other. So really, honestly, my biggest achievement is to raise 3 healthy children and to live in a happy marriage. It's not something that it doesn't just come, right? It doesn't just happen. So I think this is my biggest achievement. Yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah, and of course, and I think this is probably the most natural answer to that many people say, that's their children, their family, and yeah, raising children. I think everybody who raised before we ever have children, we think we're ready, and nobody's ready, and that could go in all kinds of directions.
Yeah.
And even having children of 20 years old, I'm still don't know if I'm ready, because every day brings a new challenge in all kind of directions.
Yeah, that's what did you really achieve it? We're not
Exactly.
done. We're not done, neither with the marriage nor with the children. But I think what you said. Look back at something and be proud of it. Yeah, I'd say qualify.
And that's yeah, I wanted indeed this is where I want to go. I keep forgetting who said it. If someone here on the podcast, might be Marson, but someone said, like, I'm at the level that I know that I can't really screw them up anymore. Like, they're old enough that they can move on and whatever. And that's, again, like you say, it's not done, because I still call my parents and ask for advice or ask for other things, but at the same time, I live independent from them, and so I can see that even with in my case, children who are 20 years or almost 20 years, it's like, okay, the biggest part is done, and at the same time, it's never done. So that I do recognize. But it's nice to see that also as a kind of achievement, because we sometimes forget it, in a sense that you've done all the other things, you've done the work, you've written the books, all of that, while doing something that for you, that's what I'm hearing, is even more valuable. Like, okay, bringing children into the world and raising them to what you consider great human beings, whatever that definition means for you.
Yeah, and the challenge here obviously is, what do you take credit for?
Too much if you ask your children, probably.
Yeah, usually your achievement is something that was within your control, something you can take full credit of. I think it's stupid and unrealistic, because most real meaningful achievements, you can't just single out a single person that really did it, or that caused it, that strive it. So I just take the liberty to call it my biggest achievement, although knowing that the credit is not clearly defined.
Yeah, true. That is something to be proud of. I think that is indeed something that you can be say the proud. And indeed, the previous question, the question before the question, I didn't link it to what you said before, or you asked before when we talked. But I see that in many people. Like, I have the very same thing. I have a book, but my daughter also published a book, and it's so much easier to make publicity for my daughter's book. And like, I will bring it up at any occasion, whatever. But talking about my own books, like, no, is this really the right moment or whatever? Like, and it's very easy to promote books from other people, books from my daughter, or but then my own books, like, is it really worth? And won't it be too much or whatever? And so this is actually one of the reasons why I do this, because I see so many people struggling is maybe the wrong word, but like thinking, is it? And of course, if you worked so hard for writing 3 books, it's not an accident that you've written a book. You've done it now 3 times. You know what it is. So of course we can bring that up and be proud of it. But it's something that is really hard for many people. And is that something that that we're becoming better at, or how is that for you?
It gets less uncomfortable, but I think it's just I think it's a trait, and it's actually something I appreciate also in others, that, people are mindful of taking space for themselves because they don't want to take it away from others, or they don't want to steal people's attention. It's something that is a recent thing. I started posting a little bit on social media, topics that I find interesting, I digest, and then I spit it out as a post, hoping that other people might appreciate, the digestion of some thoughts. And then you see things like, oh, wait a minute, here's a better way of doing this. It's not too long ago I read the best way of doing this is first, those stupid things, right? A provocative headline that makes people want to react to it. And then you do a video or some slide, a video, it was LinkedIn video thing now. You would do the video, and it is important how long people watch the video and where you are at the algorithm or whatever. So the goal in the video is to keep people as long as possible watching your video. And the technique to achieve this is you talk about nothing for minutes and minutes and minutes. People, sit in front of wait a little bit. Now it will come. The answer to my provocative question. And when I read this, I immediately felt such a repulse. I thought, wow, how can you be so disrespectful to people's attention? I hate it. I like posts that that indicate, here's what I will talk about, and allow me with either titles or subject to quickly screen and decide for myself, is it interesting or not. So I feel like self-promotion, if it's to a point where it helps people to see, does she have anything interesting to offer? It's one of those books of interest for me. That's fine. But self-promotion that is aimed to convincing you how great my books are, or how important it is, it is a big practical challenge owning your own business and not wanting to go out there and advertise for your services. It's a challenge. And I have not found the golden answer for myself, how to strike a great balance, but I'm still in the process of learning. So yeah, a little bit less uncomfortable, but on the other hand, you do see clear limits where you don't want to go.
Yeah, definitely. What your example you give, like, okay, that, and I think we all seen indeed. It's commercials. I sometimes also feel that in series or movies, like they have cliffhangers to make sure that you do it, and then it's like there is almost nothing said, and then there is a cliffhanger because it was commercial, and so I get that feeling. That's definitely something I hope to avoid as well. That's also like, I have interesting things to say, but I won't say them. Read my book, and then it. Like,
Exactly.
That's the other kind of thing. I don't like that either. Let's move to that next question. Do you have a personal agility tip to share?
So when I started experimenting with agile ways of working, a few things didn't make a lot of sense to me, and I was thinking, maybe it's my mindset. I'm old-fashioned. But I figured out, they don't apply. My personal agility tip is be very careful of, how the work is designed, what the requirements are. Agility doesn't always help you. It's not always the right, methodology to use. What I did learn, one is partly true, but what I did learn is the minimum viable product. It helped me tremendously in my work as a consultant. I stopped overproducing things and overcomplicating things, overprocessing things for the clients. I try to, to keep my focus on, okay, let's do this. Was this enough? Is that? And sometimes, clients halfway said, you know what, that's all we needed. Great. At that time, my boss wasn't very excited about it because it kind of, cut the days we sold a little short. Today, I say, perfect, done my job, awesome. The customer, maybe they come up with something else they need from me, maybe not, and I go somewhere else. But that was helpful. Also for myself, also for the books, frankly. Especially with the second book, I kept thinking, oh, is this good enough? Do I need to write more about this? And shouldn't I give more background on that? And is that actually was a German book? That's why it's not mentioned here. It's not the recent, but the one before. And I thought that can't be enough. That it's just not good enough. And then the publisher told me, you don't write the book for yourself. You write it for the reader. If they feel they need it, they get it somewhere else. And I kind of think, okay, what's the kind of product I want to sell? I don't want to sell the perfect book, but where I say, hey, I would like to read it. I'm trying to write a book that's perfect for the people that buy it based on the title, based on whatever expectation they have for that book. So that is something. And the half-truth lies in iterations, in complex and longer-term aspects. To learn to iterate is great because it just saves you a lot of waste going in the wrong direction and all that. But funny enough, and I don't know why, when I work with any tools, right, Excel, or I try a new online tool, my husband keeps telling me, honey, you might want to just do this one thing and try it first, see if that kind of works. And I can never do it. I can't. I set up the whole process when I need something, I want to, I don't know, send out something or find a new scheduling tool. I set up the whole schedule and then I see if it works. I don't know why I can't get myself to iterate, put in one date, first see if it integrates with your calendar. Maybe it takes time, and maybe a year from now I say I finally started iterating with technical tools and it saved me a lot of times. Today I can't do it and I don't know why. Maybe I have no idea. Maybe it's a mindset topic. But I allow myself the slack of not applying the principle, even if it would make sense in that case.
But that is, again, for me also a little bit part of Agile in the way that it's doing what feels right for you, not per se because whatever methodology or other people say that's the right thing. Thinking still is part of Agile, I would say. Using and yeah, you talked about the Agile Manifesto. That very first sentence of the Agile Manifesto, it says also we're uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others. And for me, that phrase or that verb, doing it, is still so important part of it, and so many people forget about that part. It's like, okay, you do stuff, you learn stuff, and you see where is it working for me and where isn't it working for me.
And it's ongoing, right? It's not we've done it and now we know. It's like, no, we keep doing it and keep learning while doing
exactly. So the people who wrote the manifesto, most of them are still learning, and some of them are still writing software. Actually, many of them are still writing software and keep learning and new things, and that's so nice about a lot of that. It's not just, okay, we've learned it then so many years ago and now we know exactly what it is and we don't need to learn anymore. No, that they keep moving and keep learning, and that is for me such an interesting thing. I want to move to that next thing, the remote work. And so the question before this question is, when did you start remote working? Is that something because all of us, we know that a lot of us, we started doing that in 2020. We needed to. But did you do remote working before or?
I did. I mean, like a lot of people, when you work in international environments, try to do without remote, right?
Exactly.
When I actually, even my first job in the consulting, actually, even earlier during university work in the scientific institute, we had international projects, and yes, we did meet face to face, but most meetings were remotely. ABB, when I worked on the global level or within Central Europe, yes, it was all remote. I mean, that was the thing, right? When COVID came and everyone tried to work remotely, and we made such a big deal out of it. I don't remember before my first remote call in the scientific institute, nobody briefed me on how do we work remotely, right? We just kind of did it. Same as everybody who works in international fields, or not only international. When your team is just placed in different sites, even if it's the same country, it's for a lot of people it was just part of the deal. What was new to me was to basically do most of my work remotely, or actually 100% of it remotely, and do things that former times I or a lot of people also thought we can only do it face to face, all of a sudden happened and worked remotely. That was the pandemic, like for many, where I was simply forced to do stuff remotely, which I would have preferred face to face before.
And so, what have you learned about remote work?
I recently learned something. I was working with a coachee, and we were preparing a moderated or mediated session between her and the line manager, and the topic way relatively heavy, and a lot is at stake. And I had clarified budget and all that. I could have traveled there, but I left it up to the coachee to decide. The boss said it's fine, and she said, "Can we do it remotely?" I said, "Wow, are you sure? That's kind of a lot of heavyweight things." And yes, she was sure. She wanted to do it remotely because I don't know how she had a good way of describing it. She wanted to allow herself the distance. I think that's what she said, and I thought that was very smart. So you go into a discussion where you gotta you have to expose some of the things that might be difficult to talk about, or you have to anticipate reactions that will be difficult to deal with, and just make a conscious decision. You know what? I'll do this remotely just because I can, and just because it allows me to protect my personal space more. I think that was a good thing I learned. And I was in a situation once where I had a client that had the habit of, I was an external coach, and the idea is that when somebody within the company wants a coach, they talk to 3 different coaches. Like a test, in that case, unpaid, right? And I did this one time with a video call, and it was a situation where it was already decided who the coach is going to be. There was a personal connection, blah, blah. So it was just, to do it by the rules, I got to talk to 3 people. And I just felt like, wow. I mean, you see my background is nothing, right? You can see some plans, but I still found I let this person kind of into my home office for no reason. So I thought for myself, if I stick with this client, the next discussion, and this was remote, right? I didn't even drive there, meet people face to face, but it was remote video. So I decided for myself, I allow myself more personal space here, and I do it via phone call, no longer video. I ended up not continue to work with that client, but maybe it was a similar experience, how you can use remote, or even use it, the different channels within remote to protect your personal space. This is something I would like to know if it resonates with people, because I didn't discuss it because it was such a new impression with a coachee. I didn't get to talk about it with a lot of people. So anyone out there resonates with you got some experience, would be cool. I guess I can comment on the video or so. Yeah.
So somehow that these conversations felt too much into your personal space, or too much into going over boundaries. That felt
yeah. And when you work with, it's also the same in coaching or conflicts. Sometimes you can feel the tension in the room, right? You can basically grab it. And sometimes it's important. Sometimes it might not be necessary to endure this. If you do it with camera, you kind of sense something, but not the full dose of dynamics than when you actually are in the same room. I'm gonna give this some more thought also around, like virtual coaching and virtual conflict management, because it kind of triggered something. I thought it was a really interesting perspective coaching gave me.
So that's and indeed, I think it's also I think it's also important to show when we have coaching to find the right kind of channel. I would say for some that might feel face to face. For some it might be video calls like we're doing now. For others it might be phone calls or whatever. And depending on where we are, that is different, of course. If you want to keep working with someone, but that person moves continents or countries, or you move continents, and then you might want to try if remote is a way of working to keep it. And depending, of course, on how much you have the connection. But I think it's so important to feel what's working for both of you. If it's
exactly. And I think what changed for me is before you always see remote work as second best. The second best option because we can't travel or so. And that was the first time I actually realized, you know what? Sometimes it might actually be the go-to solution, a better solution than face-to-face. That's kind of new. There was, I don't want to take too much time, but just the recent book, I did look a little bit into personality psychology as well. Didn't go too much in depth, but you're considering introversion, extroversion at the workplace. Introverted people, they might enjoy a little bit more protection in social situations, a more, the ability to just withdraw a little bit more and protect your personal space. They might be more comfortable behind a camera than when they sit in a room full of people. I think that was something that, and I do know that at least during the pandemic, there was a little bit of research done around those things, like how much impact or negative impact the pandemic has on people kind of varied, also based on their personality.
Exactly. Yeah, I think many people. I know a lot of introverts that, and not all of them, but a lot of introverts who said, well, actually, for me, I've learned that remote working is sometimes better because I can focus. I have my own environment, and because the some of the offices are really not made for me, and they started to realize, like, oh, working in my home office with my door closed and with whatever music I want to listen to actually feels much more how I can focus on work and go maybe. And so that is something that a lot of people learned in the pandemic. Vice versa, different as well. Some people said no. And in most cases, the more extroverted people really want to be in the office. And it's not just a black and white on introvert and extrovert, but again, people realize that an environment has an impact on me and how I work. And of course, the job depends also a little bit. If you're a nurse, probably you can't do it from a distance. But with recent technology, we already know that some surgeons are operating remotely as well with computers and with robots. So
and I like what you said when you said it allows you to focus more. And there are actually some psychological theories around media psychology which show exactly that, the richer the medium is, the more information you have to deal with, which helps in situations that are ambiguous or that are emotionally charged, or with a certain uncertainty and complexity. You might need a medium that allows you for all the information going into a room, understanding power dynamics just by the way people choose their seat around the table, the distance they sit from each other, right? Do you turn to your left or to your right? Who's sitting on your left? Who's sitting on your right? All those things. Sometimes those informations are important, but sometimes they're not. Such straightforward information for people, something that's pretty clear, or something you just want to clarify things that are straightforward. Then that overload of media richness that's called based on that theory, it simply creates a struggle to focus, and information overloaded over complicates things. And I think this is really cool. The same goes the other way around. A really complex situation, maybe high stake, maybe you got to do some like balance out some trust or build some relationships. Yeah, phone call won't do it, obviously, right?
Mhm.
It's not enough information. It's under complex, basically. But I think, yeah, this theory, from the 60s, I'm not sure. It's cool because a friend of mine, he shortly before the pandemic, he's written a book about it, about leading on a distance. And he worked with all those old psychological models. And by the time the publisher that he and I had published before rejected his book, it's like nobody is. And then the pandemic hit. He had found a different publisher, and the book was a hit, obviously, right at the right time. And he's a psychologist. He really put in great detail and great research in his book. But it was kind of funny. Then you see those theories from the 60s. You feel like, yeah, that's it, right? It applies today. I kind of need it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes indeed we forget about the old research because we typically focus on the new research or the new pop books or whatever, and then we forget, like, hey, you know what? There was already research about
Yeah,
focus
exactly.
or other kind of things some years ago.
Mhm.
And I think the same we can say about agile. I've noticed that. Well, we might the people joining, let's say in the last 5 to 10 years, the industry, they might learn about some technologies or ideas from agile or other kind of things from now, but might not know what was written
Yeah.
20 years ago or why we moved into this direction.
Mhm.
And that's the other thing. We need to look back sometimes and, hey,
Mhm.
what was written about some of that?
Exactly, basics, right? What do we know about the basics? Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's
Mhm.
that's. Thanks for calling it the basics. I didn't even. Yeah, that's indeed. And talking about written things and other things, what is a book that you have read that you want to talk about? And I know you have. Yeah, I'll let you bring it.
Yeah, I did read the book from Lyssa Adkins. You have it.
Coaching Agile Teens.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a while, but I just simply liked the way she structured the knowledge and the chapters. She took the reader on a journey, similar to what I tried with this agile leadership thing, right? You start, I can only assume that part of it reflected her personal journey as a coach. But this is how it feels when you read it. And then I was lucky enough to see her in person, was the Agile 2022, I believe, in Scotland, where she spoke. And I was also invited to speak about psychology behind agility. And I wrote it down. So her keynote was called Agilists, Superpower and Challenges. And there's one thing I don't like, and this is, now forgive me out there, people calling themselves agilists. Like, what is this? And what were you guys before? Were you waterfallists? That, is that a description of an identity, to be an agilist? So when I read the title and I thought, oh, this is going to be one of those, maybe dogmatic, certainly a little bit of idealistic way of presenting agilist ways as the new super like thing. And I mean, kind of that was the title of her speech. But then I was very positively surprised. There were two things which I think were really I still remember, that caught my attention. And I'm reading this because I actually looked it up in her original slides. So what she says is, inspect and adopt your way of working without capitulating to limiting beliefs and structures that no longer serve. This was her definition, basically, of agility, or her, call to action for people working in agile ways. And that hits totally home, right? Understanding what's the essence of agile: sense and adapt, and don't stop adapting, and don't stop sensing. She called those limiting beliefs that we might have. And it's similar to psychoanalysis, right? Certain schools, we define ourselves by certain limiting beliefs, but really trying to free yourself from those, and don't stop to inspect and adapt, to sense and adapt. That is what agility is about. I thought that was very inspiring. And then there was a second thing, a quote she had from Jonathan Smart. He wrote a book, Anti-Patterns and Patterns for Business Agility. Haven't read it yet, but I might want to, simply because I like this quote a lot, which is, impediments are not in the path, they are the path. Have you read this before?
No, I haven't, but I like that indeed. That's it's it reminds me of another quote, resistance as a resource, from said that I can't come up with the person's name, but that for me says like, okay, what I've learned from that conversation, and it was also turned into a blog post, I think, is that the person said like, okay, people who are resistant, they tell you something, it's really important, and they tell you some messages, and indeed I can think that impediments, they tell me something, and they watching and looking at the impediments can help me in that. I don't know if that was the message, of course. Huh?
Similar. I mean, the part with the resistant, and I actually took last year to look a little bit more into the psychological background, obviously, in resistance during change processes and so on. The short answer is resistance is energy. Where you get no energy, where you have no involvement, no engagement, there's no resistance.
Exactly.
So, what you said, there is something behind it. It's a treasure. It's something you can use and work with to then advance. The thing with the impediments, actually, it is similar, yeah. To understand that. Oh, and it reminds me, and I accompanied a larger agile transformation with a larger company, and impediments were kind of spoken about, not enough for my liking. We talked about making your own manifest and ways of working and values and all those big fluffy things, and basically ignored that really what also the business needed was simply to remove impediments. And that's a simple, straightforward thing, right? You see what are the impediments, one by one, you remove them. Now, what I think it works, but what I don't like about it is impediments become something yucky. There's an impediment, right? You take out your tonsils and you remove this impediment. You move on, right? Just finally out of your way. And that doesn't do impediments justice. You will, encounter, the reason that you encounter impediment is actually, that's a great sign. It means that you strive for something different or for something more or whatever. So you hit some sort of a wall. You encounter something that doesn't fit in your concept, and saying, okay, this doesn't block me. It's not in that way. It actually is the way, means I start dealing with this impediment, trying to understand it, and I did like this, the impediment not as something I need to remove, but as something I need to use as a as a reason to rethink what I actually want, what do I need instead. So instead of, for example, you have the impediment of there's too many approval layers, we're too slow. Impediment, let's remove approval layer 2 and 3. Awesome. Part of the impediment removed. We still have a few layers in between. That's kind of a negative, it's hard to describe, way of working. Now, instead I could go, well, what's in my way? In my way is I'm not empowered. I need more empowerment. So stop removing approval layers, just give me, authority to make decisions myself. So that would be a part of being the way. The way is then to increase my empowerment, my power at that stage. So I kind of like this, and it also means that, like in reality, you don't have that one defined path, and then you identify the impediments in the way, It means you hit a wall somewhere or a boundary or something, which is great. It means you went beyond like your scope of action, beyond your wiggle room, your room of maneuver. You went beyond, you hit a wall. Great. Maybe that is exactly the way you need to go. And the impediment is really what gives you that step, what leads you to take a step into this direction. This was brought up by her. I don't exactly know the context that she brought it up in, but it was in that speech where where she just talked about we gotta challenge ourselves and not limit ourselves. We need to really, what I said before, life it's complex, complicated, and it's chaotic. It throws things at you constantly, or you encounter things. All those little things are opportunities to adjust yourself or to learn something new, to think differently, start going in new directions and new ways. So that was very nice to bring this up in the context of just really talking about the essence of agility, of thinking agile. Yeah.
I really like that. It's really, it's and that way you we went much broader than just the book. And at the same time, I think indeed what that's exactly what the path that Lyssa, or not exactly, but Lyssa went much further than that book, of course, over the years. That said, you said I haven't read it in a while, and that's for me it's the same thing. I think I read it in 2010, something like that. But I don't know exactly, but I think it was during the pandemic or just after. I listened to the book. I think Lyssa created the audio version of the book in the pandemic, if I'm correct. And that for me was really interesting to, so many years later, to listen to the book. And in some things I thought like, oh, that's new. That's not in the book. And then I took the paper version, like, oh, it was already in there. Okay, I somehow forgotten.
What? You might not have forgotten. This is something out of university still. It's been a while, but that caught my attention. It was from developmental psychology, yet another little major within the psychology domain, which is about how do children develop, or what happens when we age, etc., etc. And there is this thing of children wanting to listen to the same book over and or read the same. You read it out loud, or they listen to a story or a tape, or today some streaming, and they listen to the same story again and again and again. And each time they listen to it, it makes more sense because they puzzle the pieces together. And then a similar thing happens when we read books. So we read it in a certain situation with a certain background of experiences and assumptions, obviously. We read it and we think, wow, I think I got a lot out of this book, put it aside, and then 5 or 10 years later, we reread it. Completely different things are going to catch our attention. Like he's like, well, wait a minute, was that in the book? And the same thing would happen if you 5 years from now, you take it, you look through it again, and you will find different things, or the same thing, but interpret it different based on then your background and experiences. I really like this. I actually have it's like a reoccurring reading list books I read when I wrote my first book as doing my research, and I have them still sitting in my shelf waiting to be reread years later. What I'm totally afraid of is rereading my own books, but I learned that's normal and that's healthy. You don't so if I take the books that made a lot of sense to me at that time, because they mirror, right, my journey and my situation. If I read it now, I wouldn't write it the same way again. And then I got this realization, and I started to really have a hard time being an author. What do? You take your books off the shelves. And I called the publisher, and I told him this, and I said, what do I do with this? And he said, it's totally normal. It's totally normal. You would never write the same book twice. I was like, that is true. Yeah, why would you? Exactly. It was so simple that he said that. But it's like, this is so true. Everything it represents a journey and has its value from the time. Like you see people that write blogs over years, you can see how they evolve, right? Their style of thinking, their sense making, or even the conclusions they have are changing. And it was just good to know it's true. It doesn't mean things aren't good anymore, but it means, yes, obviously you would never write the same thing twice. What I would like to ask Lyssa, if I ever see her again, is how she feels about her book. Would she write it the same way, or what would she change? Would be a question.
Yeah, good question. I think this is one of the things I liked about Henrik Kniberg. Once did second edition of some of his books, where basically he didn't rewrite it, but he added comments to his first book. So he basically had to say, "Oh, I no longer believe this," or "This is."
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. I'm trying to come up with the names of his books. The book where he did that, I think it's Experience Scrum from the Trenches. I think I think that's the book where he did that. I will add the book in the show notes as well. Because it was really wonderful to read that second edition, to really read all the things he said. Okay, this is where I've changed over the years, where I think differently. That's it's for me even more interesting than a second edition that is written differently. But it's really like this is where I think differently. I really love that. It made me appreciate that book even more. So yeah, that
sounds really interesting. Yeah,
I like that as well. And I want to move already to, for me, a really interesting question, especially with conversations like today that move in all kinds of directions. What is a question that you think I should also ask you, and what is the answer?
Might be too good of a question for the time of the day. Allow me to turn it around. What question would you have?
It's well, maybe to turn back to turn back to the conversation we just had, or the remark about the second edition of a book. If you would look back at one of your 3 books, and maybe the last one is too early because you just published it today, but if you would reread your first book, if you think about it, were there things that you would say, hey, this is something I've changed my mind about, and maybe it is in a way in your new book, in other books, but were there things in your books that you say, if I look back, I no longer believe in that or that?
That did happen when I was challenged, where somebody asked me, well, this agile leadership model, can I use that for my team? That was the moment when I thought, wow, am I going down the wrong lane, focusing on leadership? But then I recovered and I'm back talking about leadership. So actually, I did a full circle, coming back. What I told you before, there's power dynamics, and you can flatten your company as much as you want. There'll always be power in the hands of certain people, and those people have special responsibilities. So talking about it is still so good. The thing with the book is, I've worked with a group of like high potentials, and they've been working in agile ways of working. By the time I haven't even heard the term, so they kind of breathe agility. And before I kind of knew who my target group is, I had written a program, and part of the program was they would get a copy of my book. Then I felt terrible about it. I was thinking, wow, oh my God, I bore them to death. What's in this book they haven't learned, they haven't heard about. Then I did, at the dinner conversation, somebody came and said, you know what, I really liked your book. And I was sharing with them, I was afraid it kind of bores you guys. And then he said, no, for 2 reasons. The one thing is, you work in agile ways for a long time. It makes sense, efficient, you continuously improve. And it's just a good way of managing the complexity and the speed and the change and all this. But you forget why it is required beyond that, current work setting. And it's not that he didn't know it, how change accelerates and how, globalization and how things are getting more interconnected and how even our topics get more interconnected. So we kind of need to change our ways of working. It's not that he didn't, that anything of it was really new, but he said the way I put it in a perspective. You read through the first chapters of the book and it kind of draws you in a certain stream that brings you further down the line. That's how he described it. And I really liked it. So he said, his understanding of agility changed fundamentally. He used it to be a better leader in a field where they work with agile ways. And especially funny because I used the book in a different context, and I told my participants, guys, you can skip the first chapters, just jump right to the competency model, and that might be a mistake to do. So yeah, but then again, I have never reread the book. So, if I would, I'm sure I would find sentences where I would, like my daughter would say, cringe. Oh, really? You can't say it that way. It sounds stupid. Or I'm sure there are some sentences in it. I did write books before, right? Scientific books. And even while I wrote them, I felt like, really? Is that going to add any value? Is that relevant? But it doesn't matter. I didn't have a choice, right? Because you write scientifically, you have to apply certain standards that might be completely, completely something different to what the reader actually wants. So I also don't recommend buying those books. It's fine. It certainly has their place in some research facilities. But so these, even writing them, I felt cringy. Yeah.
But yeah, that's I think it's the same thing. Well, like with developers reading their own code 6 months later, I would say if you don't cringe at some points of the things that you wrote, then what have you learned anything since then?
Right.
Have you improved? That I hope that you've moved on and learned some things. And still, that doesn't mean that book isn't valuable. I have the nicest example I have is the 2 books from Ken Beck about extreme programming. There is a first and a second edition, and for me these are 2 different books, and I love both these books. They bring different things. I think he should have written it with a different title so that both books are still available. He has his own reasons for saying, okay, I've rewritten it because for whatever reason, he was not happy anymore with that first edition. But for me, it's like these are 2 different kind of books, and this is very normal. At some point, you learn something, you realize, oh, I don't like the way I sounded before, and yeah, depending on how I feel, I prefer the first or the second edition.
Exactly.
There's a lot in me that prefers that first edition, but that's probably because I was so blown away by that first edition, and yeah, then later on I can never get that same feeling anymore about the second edition because I had learned already so much, and that is also part of these things, of course. Really wonderful way of looking again at your own books and at your own work. I really love that way of thinking. I want to move to already that last question. Who do you think I should ask next? And I think you had 2 people in mind that you wanted to invite, if I'm correct.
Yes, yeah. So it was Joseph Pellerin, I don't know if I pronounce his name correctly. He sits in Switzerland, but I learned that you already had him as a guest, which
So I did indeed talk with him
yeah,
at number 151, just like I talked with Lyssa already before.
yeah,
I'm a big fan of Joseph. It really was a wonderful conversation. I was about to say similar to this, and that's of course doing unfair to both the conversation I have with you and with Joseph. But yeah, we talked a lot also about psychology and lots of
mhm,
different things.
yeah.
Very logical because you both have similar kind of background or moved in similar kind of things
Yeah.
in the coaching industry, I would say. Um,
So this is
wh-
the
but like before we move to the second question, why was it important for you to invite Joseph? What is so for you so important that I would have needed to talk to him?
yeah. So I don't know how long ago it was. We just actually we never met, or we never met in person. Just had maybe even one phone call, several phone calls. I don't know, video. And he has this unique background, right? He's a psychologist like I am, but he's been part of the whole agile movement basically from day one. So
Indeed.
the way he interconnects two subjects goes beyond what I can do because I'm not, so far into the whole agility topic. And what I also liked about him is he has a great sense of proportion, what's important, what's not dogmatic, right? He applies common sense, but in a very vigorous way. And he uses science, obviously, but in a way that allows for sense making, in a way that doesn't put any certain. It's like somebody that comes on and say, "Wait, I have a study that proves X, Y, Z. So now that's what the data says." That kind of person, it probably hasn't heard the shot, as we say it in German. You get it, you've got one study, one data point, rely on statistics somebody else did. Difficult. And now Joseph he just has the seniority and the vigorosity to look at scientific research and what it is, trying to screen through and find the essence, and then be able to apply it out of those unique two perspectives. This is why I also like him personally. I think it's definitely I think he just recently spoke about the same topic, psychological safety. I missed it, unfortunately, but absolutely going to watch the session you made with him. I'm sure that's worthwhile listening to.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing up the research, because he talked basically also about the research and having a lot of that, I think, on his phone, and that he can actually, when people talk about it, he can look it up, he can show. He also made publicity for, or he talked about his newsletter, and it's really wonderful because I keep forgetting the cadence, but every X time that he sends out, he mentions research, and it's so wonderful because I somehow have in my idea that, okay, I know something about research that is interesting to Agile, and every week, or every time I receive a new version of that newsletter, I'm blown away, because there's something in there that either I didn't know, or it's going in a different direction than I thought it was, and I'm like, oh damn it, okay, there is still
Yeah,
something I keep
yeah,
learning.
exactly. I like this. Yeah, and this, you have to have some certain sense of proportion and openness to be able to integrate those things that exactly lead in a completely different direction. You know what? I didn't know he has a newsletter.
Well, and this is why I bring it up, because I think not enough people know it,
Yeah,
and
funny.
well, yeah, I love this. I have been bugging him for years about a book that he might write, and
Yeah.
something, but the newsletter is already a little insight on this, really, in a very how is the right word? Yeah, it's in a way written that is very approachable.
Mhm.
It's both scientific and not scientific, in a way that it's really nice to read it. It typically is very well, readable. It's like,
Mhm.
yeah, every time I get a message like that, it's like, okay, I can quickly read it.
Yeah.
I do understand the research a little bit better. I can go into much more detail. I sometimes do email him and ask some more about it. Really wonderful how he brings up,
Mhm.
basically that knowledge all the time.
Yeah.
So that's really wonderful. But indeed, I had him already, and so because I told you that, then you said, okay, then I have a second person I want you to talk to. And who is that person you want me to talk to?
Yeah, so her name is Tine Bieber. She's a German, but she lives in the
And
Netherlands.
that should be her.
That is her. And I don't know, last year or so, we met through the European Organizational Design Forum. That's how we originally met. And we just started having some conversations, doing some LinkedIn Live events and so on. And she has a good story to tell about working in startup companies that are, from the outside look like, wow, that's the future of work. A great way, flat hierarchies. They're all one big team. Spend a lot of time investigating their purpose and the way they want to work. And all that fancy and shimmery and wow, so cool. But people are just, it's not just people. I know people that are proud to work for a company because the product is really cool, or it's craftsmanship, or something like that. Those kind of people are proud because actually they feel like part of the family, right? They're part of the gang or the clan. They're kind of, honestly, something that also bugs me in a lot of literature, like reinventing organizations, this tiny sense of ideology that get mixed in the way we work, in the place we work at, which is, from a psychological perspective, not okay. It's not okay. So she was part of those kind of companies, obsessed with themselves. Just a simple way of putting it, obsessed with finding their own purpose. Now you spend so much time finding your own purpose. Wait, finding your company's purpose. But then, of course, the next workshop day is aligning your personal purpose with the company purpose. And they've done this all, and in the end, they were all part of this big, purposeful blob of people marching in the same direction. And now what she experienced firsthand is how you get lost in this. The lines get blurry. What's the company's purpose? What's my purpose? What's my role in it? How much of my life and my identity and my priorities and values are determined by this company? Calling themselves extremely inclusive, right? We're all, like, everybody here is part of us, extremely exclusive, because nobody on the outside could penetrate that system. They're going to be a cultural fit if they want to be hired. You dare not hire somebody older, somebody more traditional. Oh, no. It's cultural fit. These kind of contradictions those companies live with, and the way it impacts you personally, it eats you up, it swallows you. You feel cozy and warm inside, but at some point you get spit out. Because guess what? We gotta reduce headcount, or I'm gonna make a drastic change, and all of a sudden you're back out on the street, and all the warm and fuzziness and all that. What was that? Was it really real? Right? Because it's gone. How can this be gone? And just the way she lived through this, and I would say the toll it took is worth listening to. She shares a lot about it. I think she's even planning on writing on her experience, which I would appreciate, because I feel like more people need to read this and to be aware of new work, future of work, and all those really cool stuff. There's still a line we got to draw between the work and the way who we are as a person. So that's why I recommended her.
I really like that story, because indeed, the tension between, we want to create a culture that is unique, And indeed, how do you bring the diversity and inclusion into these kind of things? Because I think we need both. We definitely need inclusion and diversity, because we know that that brings so much more quality in all kind of aspects. And at the same time, I understand, like, okay, we want to create some kind of culture in a company, but yeah, it's very dangerous indeed to hire people that understand it. And I do remember having being in conversations about hiring someone, and we had 3 candidates, and I know that me and my co-interviewer, we were all very happy about one person, because it really felt like this is really a match. And then we had we had 3 people, but we had the second person where we said, like, technically it feels the same, but we have less a click with it. And I do thinking about it in the weekend and saying to my partner, like, okay, maybe we should hire the other one, because it's too much a click, and that means that maybe there's no difference between
Absolutely.
us.
Where's the advancement? Where's, exactly.
Exactly. And we ended up hiring that second person, and as far as I know, that second person is still working there. And yeah, so that was what really was needed. It was not always easy, because that person sometimes contradicted us, but that's exactly what we were looking for. So
Good.
so yeah.
Exactly. That's maturity, right? That's a mature organization, not a.
But it's hard, because you hire someone where you see, like, I know that it's not. It will sometimes, what we say in Dutch, feel strange, ringing, and it will sometimes be hard. But that's exactly what we need to for So yeah, I really like that way of thinking. Really wonderful. So I'm really looking forward to talking to her. So that's really nice. Stefanie, we've been talking for a while. If people want to connect with you, what's a good way to connect with you?
Best way is LinkedIn.
And LinkedIn should be this address, I think. Is that correct?
I think so. Yeah. Perfect.
Because it's a very long one, but I will add it into the show notes.
Perfect.
Well. Same with the Amazon stores, where people can find your book as well.
Appreciated. So out there, just feel free to connect. Appreciated Eve talking to you, hearing your perspectives, and I think it was a great and enriching conversation. I really liked it.
I liked it as well. It was, again, this is, well, it's a nice way to spend my Friday evening. It's not fully evening yet. It's the start of the weekend, I would say. But really like to end my week this way, because it's conversations like this give me a lot of energy. Again, I really like it. We moved in many different kind of directions. We sometimes went back to linking different kind of things that we talked about earlier on in the conversation. Talked with linking it back to the conversation I had with Joseph and his research and other kind of, or the research that he spreads to people, or the research that he knows about. So a lot of different kind of things. So I really liked it very much. So thank you very much for your time.
And if I may ask one favor from the audience, if you're interested and you're actually gonna look at this book here, I'd love any sort of feedback. It's, like I said, brand new out there. And of course I had test readers, but I'm actually really excited about seeing the resonance, seeing what resonates with people within the book. So if you give it a try, just give me a shout out, shoot some feedback over. That would be highly appreciated.
Yeah, I would say that I want to broaden it, because I think this is so true for every author. I think if people, the same here, if you have comments about this conversation, but I would say leave a comment on Amazon about the book, reach out to authors and tell you what you liked so much about it. Yesterday, I think I heard somebody saying, if you know a book that's written by an author who is dead, or is an author who is famous, just go to the library and lend it there. But if it's from not famous, not rich author that's still alive. Buy the book, leave comments, teach people about what could be better, and spread the word, because it's there's a lot of books written about agile, and I think if I compare it to 20 years ago, we have a lot more books. Most of them are good, but spread the word for people, and spread to your friends what you like, but the books you like. If there's books you don't like, write to the author what could be improved. And that's that I think we're at that way. We're all living on the shoulders of each other. So I think that's really good question to ask to people, because we should do that much more.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm going to drop off. Thank you very much for your time, and I do wish to once meet you at the conference. I have no idea where and what, because I'm spending a lot of time on these podcasts and less on conferences, but I do hope that we might run into each other.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Have a good one. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.